Thank you. I'm really excited to be here today, also because unknowingly, actually, the panelists right before me kind of did an intro right into what I'm talking about with their emphasis on communication and storytelling. So thank you to Joe and Joelle who did that from the last panel. Today I'm going to talk about essentially telling your story and moving yourself in that story in order to move others. And it's geared towards millennials, but I think it's also applicable to all age ranges and states of mind. So, my name is Hannah, and you don't know me, but essentially I think for a lot of you, we know each other. And we know each other for a couple of reasons. One is that I graduated into the recession, like many of you have or will. And that kind of sets us apart. Yeah, I got a double thumbs up. It's kind of a thumbs down, but I'll get a thumbs up. Secondly, because you all are here, I know that you care about something. And because you care about something, somewhere along the line, someone has either said this to you or posted it to your Facebook page. And this is a myth. It's a myth that taunts us. But I'm going to come back to this later. And the third reason I think that we know each other is because you also know that Beyonce was once a Destiny's Child. But more than that, we know each other because essentially someone is trying to tell our story, right? People are out there trying to tell the story of our generation for us. And they use words like selfies and Facebook and entitled, but they also do use words like progressive and diversity and charity. And apparently the wine industry, I don't know how that came, but that was as of Friday's Google search. And don't get me wrong, we are definitely in a story together because we do have a lot of these unifying factors and we essentially know each other. But what I'm putting forth today is that it's actually our charge to take charge of our story, both as our generation and also as individuals representing our larger generation. And so with this in mind, I humbly come to you to essentially share my own story. And my own story also starts back with Beyonce. Because about the same time Beyonce was going solo, I too was launching my solo career and I left for college. I went to college and I got a degree in environmental policy, and then I graduated ready to save the world. And then I bounced around from a lot of jobs. I worked on campaigns, and I worked on organic farms, and I sent out dozens and dozens and dozens of applications and got nothing in return. But then I landed a really cool job. I used to work for the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. My job was an outdoor environmental educator, which was the coolest. Essentially, I would have groups of students come out to an education center where I lived, which is located on Smith Island, Maryland. And I would have them, and we'd go on cool outdoor adventures, and we'd do a little bit of bay ecology, and then a little bit of environmental stewardship. And I got to spend every day outside. But then I get this question. Hannah, where is Smith Island? So glad you guys didn't ask. Well, Smith Island is actually a very, very tiny island in the middle of the Chesapeake Bay. The only way to get there is to take an hour-long ferry ride, which is a small boat. Doesn't really even look like the kind of ferry you can put a car on, because there are no cars on Smith Island. But more importantly, it's actually located in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, which naturally, as all of you know, means that all of the pollution from all of that huge watershed goes into the Chesapeake Bay and affects Smith Island. The watershed touches 6 states and has cities like Annapolis, Richmond, D.C. Has a huge effect on that environment. And this is Smith Island. Smith Island is actually 3 different communities on about 8 miles of land, which is mostly marshland, so you can't even build on it. It's below sea level. And yes, it is incredibly remote. Less than 200 people live on the island, and they've actually been there so long that they speak a bizarre version of Old English. It's a very bizarre accent because they were colonized, and then that was it. And for a year, this was my house. I lived there on Tylerton, which is a neighborhood in Smith Island, and it had about 54 people. I was number 54, and I didn't have internet or a cell phone or anything like that, which means that I was living out there for a year, very remote, and I had no idea that Katy Perry was famous. I didn't even know who she was for an entire year, guys. But it was beautiful because I got to see things like this and live in an environment like this. And I got to see really cool animals, like this oyster toad fish, which islanders actually eat. And then also, that's a baby brown pelican. There are rookeries all over the bay now, but it's only recently that they've even come this far north. We all know why that is. And this is a great black-backed gull that I got to see hatch on another rookery. And this was a picture I took of sunset from the dock where I lived, and it's looking out on the shanty of one of the islanders named Eddie Russ. The shanty is where they store their workboats and also sort crabs and all that sort of thing. As I mentioned, the only way to get there is by ferry. You can actually see the ferry over there coming into the county dock, which is the only way things come or go from the island. And on the other side is the person with the most epic, like, Smith Island name ever. His name is Captain Clyde Wesley Bradshaw. Yeah. He even had, like, a leather belt, and it said Clyde Wesley Bradshaw, which was awesome. He quit school when he was 13 to own his own boat. Then he went and worked on the tug for a while, and then he came back to Smith Island, and he is now a captain with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. And he was also my best friend on the island, because there's not that many people, but also he's really awesome, and you'd want him to be your best friend too. In fact, he once very wisely told me, after I had tied up a boat on the wrong end of the wind so that my boat was just slamming up against my dock, that the only thing I must have learned in college is how to get stupider. And you know, there's a lot of truth to that sometimes, especially living out there. But I actually want to tell you the quintessential story that explains people living on Smith Island, which is the story of this guy named Eddie Russ Smith. And he was out one day on his boat, and everyone on Smith Island is a waterman. So what that means is that whatever the season is, that's the kind of fishing you do. So crabs, soft crabs, oysters, rockfish, whatever it is, that's what you do because you make your entire living off the water, and it's the only occupation on Smith Island, except for one postmistress, because we do have a post office. So Eddie Russ is out on his boat one day, and he's doing this thing called scraping, which is how you get soft crabs. It's basically that you comb through bay grasses and then like pick up a load of it, and that's where soft crabs are. But as you might imagine, there is a decent amount of bycatch. So one day, he's pulling in his nets, and all of a sudden, this giant stingray plops out onto his boat and is like flailing around. Now, we all know about Steve Irwin. We know the dangers of this. And so it's flopping around, and he's freaking out, and he's trying to get it off his boat, and the barb comes, and this poisonous barb sticks him straight through the cap, like straight through, right? But Eddie Russ, he's a waterman, and he's out there all by himself. So he's like, hey, no problem, this is what I'm gonna do. So he takes pliers, cuts off the barb, pulls it through, cauterizes the wound with his cigarette, and drives himself to the mainland to go to the hospital. Okay? Eddie Russ Smith, yes. And that's it. That's the kind of life they lead. They are out there, they rely entirely on themselves and the health of the Chesapeake Bay. Which also means that they have an incredible respect for the bay and for what it provides and how we treat it, because it's the entire basis of their living and their culture and everything that island has ever known. And sometimes being out there kind of felt like a Norman Rockwell painting. I took these photos on the 4th of July, but actually there are only 9 children on the island, and they all learn in a one-room schoolhouse still until they go to high school, and then they take a school boat over to the mainland and go to high school. But it's also a really hard life, and not just because all the islanders do manual work, and there are stingrays, but also because of erosion and climate change. Many of you probably know this, but the Chesapeake Bay is very unique in that the Chesapeake Bay sits on the same tectonic plate as Greenland. So if my hand is the Chesapeake Bay watershed and this is Greenland, essentially like the weight of it has like popped up the bay a little bit. So as the ice is melting, the actual land of the Chesapeake Bay is sinking and sea level's coming up, right? So the rates of erosion and sea level rise we see in the Chesapeake Bay is very unique. And also, there's a dead zone floating around the bay, killing everything in its path. It's making it really, really tough for watermen to have a living out there. Which brings me to this guy, and his name is Daniel Smith, although everybody calls him Boone, because there are a lot of Daniel Smiths on Smith Island. And he is 26, and he is the last waterman. He's the last waterman of Smith Island because the bay is dying and there is no one coming up behind him. He's it. And when he's done, the watermen of Smith Island are done because the bay simply cannot support their way of life anymore. And it's such a beautiful cultural thing of Maryland that's slipping between our fingers and going away. And that is why I decided that I had to leave Smith Island. Because I was there and I was witnessing it, and it was beautiful and it was heartbreaking. And every week I got to show 30 students all about Smith Island and try to change their mind and inspire them towards sustainability. And then it occurred to me that 30 students just wasn't enough, that it wasn't enough to be doing that, and that I had to leave the island so I could tell their story and tell the story of what's happening right here in our backyard. Like, this is Maryland. And I wanted to change the norm, not just for Smith Island, but also for all communities that experience the effects of climate change in much more subtle ways. And that is when the U.S. Green Building hired me about 2 years ago. And they gave me an outlet for this passion that I had that I wanted to bring back to the mainland. The mission of the U.S. Green Building Council is to transform the way buildings and communities are designed, built, and operated, enabling an environmentally and socially responsible, healthy, and prosperous environment that improves the quality of life. It's kind of a mouthful, but it's pretty great, right? Like, that's something that we all kind of want to sign on to. And it also turns out that we as Americans spend 90% of our time inside a building. And I also kind of think that the other 10% is usually going between buildings, but that's not scientifically proven. And buildings are such a huge contributor to energy use. Just as someone was speaking about the story about the lights in her congregation, I get to tell that story all the time because I'm always only speaking in buildings. And we deal with the built environment. So to do this, USGBC created probably the brand that's more recognizable to you, which is the LEED rating system, which is, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, essentially a very complicated checklist for a building to show how healthy it is, both for the environment and also for the people that are in that building. When it's done, we kind of like to think of it like a little, calorie and ingredient label on the side of food, but for a building. And it's great. The USGBC helps to certify 1.5 million square feet a day of buildings, which is a lot. It has a huge impact, and we're excited to see it. But I'm not an engineer, and I'm not an architect, and I've never built a building. And so my passion really wasn't sitting with that. It was going back to reaching more people, right? To going back to students, which is why I actually am with the Center for Green Schools. And our mission is for green schools for all within this generation. Because everybody goes to school at some point in their life. There is no other unifying factor quite like schools are. In fact, 25% of the American population actually still goes to school every day, because that includes students, teachers, facilities workers, maintenance, everything. 1 in 4 people go to a school every day. That's huge, and that means we can have a huge effect on the effects of climate change if we reach out through schools. But what is a green school? Along with the Department of Education, we have defined it as this. Where there is net zero waste, water, and energy, where there is enhanced health and well-being, and also where there is promotion of environmental literacy, which essentially means We want to raise sustainability natives. We want to raise just how this current generation is technology natives. It's ingrained in them. They just know how to do it. We want that for sustainability. But other than that, I actually have a really cool job. Again, I know. Where I manage a network of 150 student groups on college campuses across the country. And they are all working towards sustainability in their own way and through their own projects. Which means that now I get to reach 3,000 students a week. And they're doing the coolest stuff. I really can't take any credit for it. I just have the benefit of being able, my job is to promote what they're doing. And my job is to be able to leverage their impact and tell their story and spread the word about all the hard work that they're putting in. We've had student groups work on Habitat for Humanity houses that are LEED certified. We've had them participate in campaigns and competitions on their campus between dorms to reduce energy use. We even had a group who did a whole unit with a local high school about LEED using a Lego building competition, which is really cool. And I'm not going to tell anybody that they're using the LEED brand. And I also travel and I speak across the country. I got to take a service-oriented bus trip 2 years ago, and then last year I did a service-oriented bike trip from here to Philadelphia to attend Green Build, which is the world's largest green building conference and expo, and that's actually coming up in New Orleans this October. And for all of you that are current students, students can actually get free registration by volunteering, and the volunteer commitment is only 8 hours. So I encourage you. That's my little plug for that. But the most rewarding thing that I've actually done in this 2 years since I got off Smith Island is one single event that I did for my sister. My sister's an elementary school teacher in Silver Spring, Maryland, and she's working in a LEED certified building, but her students didn't know anything about it. And so I just put together a really cool, well, I thought it was really cool, really cool to a kindergartner, that's top of the line, but a scavenger hunt at the school where the students could go around and learn about the different ways that their school is green. So essentially turned their school into an education tool in and of itself, which was really exciting. And I did this as part of the Green Apple Day of Service. The Green Apple Day of Service is something the Center for Green Schools promotes in that we ask teachers, community members, students, anybody to host a sustainable service project at a school. And that can be a K through 12 school, or it can also be on your very own college campus. And we see the coolest projects. Everything from educational events like I did, like a scavenger hunt, to huge renovations where they repaint buildings with low VOC paints, or they put in school gardens, or they do maintenance or schoolyard cleanups. And it's awesome. And it is coming up again on September 27th. Last year, we'd had over 2,000 projects happen. And this year, I would love to double that. So actually with me, I brought some commitment cards. You can come see me after this, where you can sign up your school now to make this commitment. Or you can also visit mygreenapple.org to check out idea cards and make an impact. And it's one day. It's one day that we're asking for you to make a commitment and a cultural shift. Because as I mentioned before, schools are the way that we do it. Everybody goes to school. Like, it is this unifying factor that I think we're really missing the boat on if we don't take advantage of it. And that is my story. But it's not the end of my speech. Lucky you guys. Because I actually want to stop here and then talk about hopefully what I just did, but what you all can do to tell your own story and create that action. So this is the formula to inspire through storytelling. It goes emotion, motivation, action. And someone in the last panel also spoke about Pixar, which is great because that also feeds right into my speech, which is that this is very similar to the Pixar theory, which is that every Pixar story has the same plot line. It goes, every day it was like this. Then one day, blank happened, and everything was different. So I did blank, and now everything is this way instead. Okay, that's every plot. It's because it's really effective. And it follows this, right? Emotion, motivation, action. But for us, and the story that we're trying to tell, we have that emphasis on the action because we want that punch at the end. We want, although if any of you have seen Up, you know that there are a lot of punches, but we want that punch at the end for you all to take action. Which means that your story also needs to be structured like this. And this is for structuring your own story. There has to be a challenge, a choice, and then an outcome. So looking back at the story that I just told you, the challenge was Smith Island, right? Not just me living on Smith Island, but the challenge that Smith Island is facing as seen through my eyes. Then the choice that I made was leaving the island, right? Coming back, trying to spread this word, trying to do the work that you all are involved in. And then the action item was Green Apple Day of Service. And when you start from the beginning and go to the end, it's like, how can I connect those? But hopefully I did. And you too can do this, whether it's a story. It does not have to be your career path. It can be anything. But it's a story that goes through this, the challenge, the choice, and the outcome that ends with that clear ask that people can make. And this is how you can do that communication and do that storytelling. But before you really do this, you have to have that story, right? Which brings me back to this. This which allures us, which taunts us, which is the solution we cannot reach. And I propose that it is not true. I propose that actually this is true. Do what you love and you will work every day of your life. And you all know this. You know this inherently because actually it's really hard, whether you are a millennial graduating into the recession or any stage of your life. If you're doing something that you love, it's really hard because you care about it. And I know that I have a long way to go, not just in how I'm not that great at PowerPoint, but in my career, I have a long way to go. I have a long way to go in my storytelling abilities. I have a long way to go in so many areas, which is why I'm committed to working for it every day. And it should feel like work because it's a challenge, because it's hard, and that's what makes it rewarding, and that's what makes other people be able to identify your passion in it. So this is what I'm asking of you. I'm asking you to be deliberate in the story that you're choosing for yourself and the story that you're choosing for our generation. And I'm also asking you to be able to tell that story, and not just down the line or not just after you think you've completed something, but tell that story today to someone at this conference before you leave, because that's how you start. It's just practice. You just start doing it. But with that, I have a lot of work to do, so don't just take my word for it. Here are a lot of really cool resources for you to check out. I'm also a big fan of just lists. Oh yes, Beyonce's on there because I spoke a lot about her today, and I was like, well, I got to give credit where credit is due. I also really suggest listening to stories. Things like This American Life or Radio Lab on NPR are just great storytelling things, the way they connect it all to a theme. So that's that. I'm gonna, I don't see Martha. I'd like to take some questions, but I know that we are short on time, so you tell me, boss. Yeah, do people get, that's a good question. Do people have any questions? Sure. Oh, do you need, I've got a mic up here. Okay. Hold on, we've got one question back there, and then we'll get to you. Oh, nope. The person with speaker's in charge.
Hi, my name is Roger, and I'm a student at George Mason. And I was wondering, what are some examples of other Green Apple Day of Service projects, and what would it look like if we were to bring it here?
Ooh, great question. So do you want examples of things that I see on higher education campuses, or are you looking to do one at your local K through 12 school?
Higher education, but all of it.
Cool. Yeah, but all of it. I like that. So first, as I mentioned, if you go to mygreenapple.org, which is listed down here, we have a lot of idea cards that are applicable to everything, and those also have like step-by-step of like how you get started doing those projects. But the main thing that I want to emphasize is that it should be something that is useful to the school. If you want to work with a K through 12 school, go there and say, hey, what can I do for you? Because the last thing teachers need is more work. And if you put in a garden in, May, no one's going to take care of it over the summer, and then it's going to all grow over. So that would be something that the school wants. But I see really cool stuff. As I said, repainting things, schoolyard cleanups, even just things like going in and volunteering to help clean and dust classrooms. Indoor air quality is such a huge issue, and dust can contribute to asthma for students. And just helping out a teacher and helping to clean their classroom can be a huge benefit to them. And then we do see larger projects. I've seen a school who built a greenhouse out of water bottles. I've seen, there's a school up in Baltimore, now you hear my Maryland accent, Baltimore, where they focus on students with autism, and they built a sensory garden in which students with autism could go and essentially learn through experiencing the plants, which is really cool. And on higher education campuses, a lot of it I see is just like awareness campaigns of what's going on, but also depending on how you do your metering in buildings, I think that doing competitions between dorms for recycling or energy use or water use reduction can be a really effective way, because nothing inspires like the spirit of competition. So, great question. Yeah, and also if you register your project on our website, then people can go and like search by zip code and then RSVP to your event, which is really helpful.
So I just want to know, in what facet does the My Green Apple organization help? Like, say someone has an idea for their school, and what's the step and what you can do for them? Like fundraising or having resources of people and stuff like that. So how does it actually process work?
That's a great question. And My Green Apple is essentially set up as a tool for you to use, because last year we had 2,000 projects, and if this year we want to have 4,000, it's not scalable if we essentially give $500 to every project. So instead, on mygreenapple.org, we have resources like how to fundraise, how to ask local businesses for in-kind donations, how to, here are the top 3 steps or considerations to put in a schoolyard garden. We also offer things like logos and flyer templates to get people in the community involved. So it's really focused as a tool. However, if you're looking for more help in doing it, USGBC is actually a chapter organization. So we have chapters of professionals located all across the country, and it is part of their charge to help with things like this and improve sustainability in the communities. So on usgbc.org, you can actually connect with your local chapter. If you're looking, for instance, if you want to bring an architect to one of your classes to talk about green design, going through the chapter is a great idea for that.
So I'm not going to graduate college for at least another 9 years.
Yes. Welcome.
I was wondering if you maybe have any tips for me as I finish school, before I get to college and I have to start thinking about my story, basically.
I'm so glad you asked, and I'm glad you're here also. What's your name? Aiden. Aiden, you're lucky. And it's not just because you may not graduate into the recession, but you're actually lucky because just by being here and being the age that you are, that in of itself is a story. And if it's told through your eyes, that makes it ever more powerful. Because me, being a millennial, addressing other millennials, it's like, oh, one more millennial who wants positive feedback. But, but for you, you have the option to tell that story. And I think Green Apple Day of Service is a great idea for you to get people at your school involved and say that, you're able to replace the light bulbs in 3 of your classrooms and, it saves your school $200. That's a story worth telling, and that's a story that you can own and build on as you go through school. And, but it's one that you can start telling now. Like, you don't have to wait to graduate to do anything. I hate it when people, I represent college students, hate it when people are like, oh, they're the leaders of tomorrow. And I'm like, are they? Because I think they're doing a lot right now. Great question. Thanks, Aiden. Oh, last one. Okay. Why am I talking? Thank you.